How are you tonight? Good. This is an interactive evening, so when I say how are you tonight, I need a little bit more oomph. So how are you tonight? It's a library too, so keep it down a little bit. But later on, you will be invited to ask questions of Gerry, and so I hope that you'll be thinking about what you'd like to say. That's going to happen in about 45 minutes' time, so you'll have your chance, and I really hope that you will participate in the interactive part of tonight. How many teachers are here tonight, by the way? So all the hungover people are... I would never have made that joke until I read this book, which is Gerry Dee's new book. It's called Teaching It's Harder Than It Looks. And if you're one of the 800,000 people in Canada who watch Mr. D on CBC television, you know what Gerry Dee is like as a teacher in television. When you read this book, you'll find out what he was like as a teacher in the classroom. And if you imagine that he was somebody who kind of improvised to get over the gaps in his ability, you'd be completely right. But you'll learn something else too, and that is that this is a person who's very passionate about some of the kids, not all the kids that he teaches, about some, not all of his fellow teachers, but about the institution of teaching. So please welcome to the stage the very, very funny and really interesting teacher, Gerry Dee.
Thank you.
How you doing?
Oh, I have a mic on. I don't need this. I'm great. Thank you.
Good to have you with us.
Can't believe you're all here. I didn't know what this... What's that? I will try to be good. You know I'm not getting paid for this, right?
So if this were a lesson, a 50-minute lesson that you hadn't prepared for?
We'd watch a movie for a bit. Tell you about my weekend. Spend 25 minutes to take attendance, and then there's about 5 minutes of pedagogy. It's perfect.
Gerry, how long were you a teacher?
I taught for 10 years. Yeah. Sad to say. You know, the misconception is because of the book, and as you said, the book has some, you know, you do see that I wasn't just this buffoon. Mr. D, that is, you know, it's a comedy, and, you know, I had someone tweet the other day that, and I saw there's a lot of teachers here, someone tweeted that I think Gerry's giving teachers a bad name, and nope, and I've had this a couple times, and nobody I know who's a teacher agrees with what he's doing, and I'm like, see, you're not getting it, you're not getting the show. Because it's not a drama. I mean, it would be very boring. It'd be very boring, and I would bet that teacher is not the most enjoyable teacher with the kids. It's just from my experiences with the anal type teachers that, you know, I remember teaching once, and a girl came in the staff room, a teacher, for about the 20th day in a row complaining, and I said, why do you do this? Like, this is, you know, complaining about the kids. This is a job that's all about the kids. So if you have no time for anything, why are you doing this? And one thing I cared deeply about was the kids. And what you don't see on Mr. D is the real side of me. Yes, I didn't know history, geography, and I guarantee you there's a lot of you out there that are teaching your subjects right now, and you're like, yeah, I don't know it that well either. There's this misconception that we are masters of our domain in our subject matter, and we are not. We'll like, basically with the job shortages each year there are, it's, you know, you go for a job, and, you know, in the back of your mind you have your teaching subject, and mine was phys ed, and you go in and you say, I'm a phys ed teacher, and they say, will you teach history? Yes, I will. And that's how you get the job.
But have you read the textbook? Like if you're teaching geography, have you read the textbook?
Here's the thing about a lot of the show, Mr. D, I got hired, I was working at the Keg, and it was 1994, and there were no jobs, no full-time jobs, so I was substituting. I don't know the way that the situation is right now. I think it's similar. So you took what you could get, and I did my student teaching at a school called St. Robert's, and the principal there was a guy named Jerry Brand. And the principal at De La Salle here where I went to school and taught for 9 years, was a lady, I forget her name, Curatola, I think was her last name. And they had worked together at St. Robert's. So I was serving him at the keg, and he said, hey, I was just talking to so-and-so, who's the principal of De La Salle, and they're getting rid of a teacher. This is like November, mid-November. And at a private school, they'll do that. They'll just, they'll end somebody if it's not working. Harder to do in the public system because it's, more union and things like that. And he said, you should apply. And I went to De La Salle, and I'd been trying to get in there. And I went, and she said, it's for history and geography. Can you teach that? And I said, yeah. I knew not. There couldn't have been two subjects I knew less about. It could have been anything but.
But you got the
I'm
job.
teaching. Yeah, well, they're in the same boat. They're like, well, we need someone. But there was so much more. And they always told me going for interviews, like, stress that you'll coach. And I did. I coached 5 teams a year. Like, I was at school till 7 o'clock. I may not have, been the best in the classroom, and I may have had shortcuts in my marking, but I contributed. I contributed in other ways.
All right, but I just wonder who you were at that time. Like, you had been at that very high school. You had been a student there.
Yeah.
And then you went to university, which is like high school on steroids. And then you went back to that school. So, and you were a young guy.
Yeah.
So, like, emotionally, how emotionally mature were you as a teacher in the classroom in your first job?
Actually, more than you would think. I mean, I was 24, and I went, having gone to the school, I felt very comfortable. So there were still teachers that taught me there.
Right.
So it was like a second home for me. So it actually made it a lot easier.
But didn't you kind of feel like a kid, too? I mean,
there were flashbacks where I would walk through the hall, and I would have a little deja vu of like, am I going to hockey practice? It was, it was very, and why are there girls here? Because there was no girls when I went to De La Salle. Yeah. So it was the best. I had the best time teaching at De La Salle, and the principal, he's now the president of the school, and I keep in touch, and like, you really make people think you were a horrible teacher, but I was the head of athletics. I was, I was very involved. Once I got into phys ed, which was where I was comfortable, a lot of kids loved me. A lot of kids just despised me, and that I think is the way a teacher should be. I don't think every kid should hate you, and I don't think every kid should love you. And you got to be in the middle, because when you're in the middle, it means you're managing and you're disciplining. And I was very. The greatest irony of everything I've done, I was probably the toughest disciplinarian of all of the staff.
Yeah, and I want to talk about
strict.
that, because you're strict about things you're strict about crimes that you yourself committed when you were a student. So we'll talk about.
We're hypocrites.
But just getting that first job, you say in the book that getting that job was like being called up in the NHL.
Yeah.
Come on.
I remember I was still at the keg, and I did that. We have an episode this year on Mr. D where I think it's going to be the second episode, where one of my students gets a hosting job, and I start picking up shifts at Barrels because I need money, because teachers don't make a lot of money. And if you want to do things extra, have a fancy car or whatever, you supplemented it. So a lot of teachers I knew would work summer jobs, would work at bars at night, and especially in your first couple of years. So I did that, and I ended up serving my first week at De La Salle, serving 2 kids I taught and their family. Well, sorry, I'm lying. They got sat in my section, so I didn't want them to see me.
Right.
So I would literally go into my section. They would be sitting here, and I traded off that table to a waiter. But I would have to serve all these other tables, so I would go into my section like this. I was so embarrassed that these kids and their mother and father at this private school would see that I was a waiter.
Did they bust you finally? Did they say, Mr.
Years later, she told me, yeah, we saw you. They were 5 feet away from us. So I forget what the question was, but...
But you said that getting the job was like being called up to the NHL.
So I'm in the keg, and I'm meeting these friends of mine who just got hired. And I was like, oh, God, I wish I could get a full-time job. Like, this substituting it was like, for a sports analogy, for me, it was like being in the minors. And when I got that job, and it was my own kids, and I had, there was something I had on them. I marked them, I graded them. Now they couldn't be a jerk to me. I felt like I had my own kids that knew my name, and I knew their name, and I could, I had meaning and purpose. So yeah, that's what it felt like.
When I was just a kid, we were terrified of our teachers.
Because you could hit kids. I mean, we were afraid because we could get hit.
Right, yeah, and they did hit us. But when we had a substitute teacher, we could make them cry. So, can you explain that dynamic to us?
Well, they couldn't make me cry. I mean, there's a certain innate quality that you need to have to teach, and a lot of teachers don't have it. And it's just that ability to just have, because you can't swear, but you need to have a voice. And people say, like, I remember some of the toughest teachers I saw teaching were women this big. And people say that women, no, like there's a management skill.
Do they teach that in college?
No, they don't teach you anything in education. Nothing. It's just a year to make money for the universities and then get certification. No, there's nothing.
So they don't teach you how to manage a kid. They don't teach you how to discipline?
They teach you how to do a lesson plan. But they don't tell you how to get through the lesson plan if the kid's at the back telling you to go F yourself for 20 minutes. So you've got this beautiful lesson plan with your objectives and your rationale and your aims for the day. And then you got tomorrow's.
But something's happened in the school. I don't know what the general age of the audience is, but we couldn't swear at our teachers when we were in school, and I'm sure you couldn't. But now they can swear at the teachers.
They did. I mean, not at De La Salle, but I got. I was reading the paper today. Marc Garneau is running for the Liberal leadership, and as soon as I saw that name, my worst experiences were at Marc Garneau Collegiate. So I will not vote for Marc Garneau. I got one of the first stories.
When you get sworn
there's
at
no
them?
response.
You can't say
just
anything.
stand there like an idiot.
But that's so against, I'm sure, the way you are in real life.
Oh, everybody.
Yeah.
I had a kid this big, and I tell this story in my stand-up. This big, and I remember I was sitting on the bench, and he just stood there, and he must have said the F word 30 different ways. I'd never heard some of these ways. At some point, I just felt like, oh, that was a good one. I've never heard that. And I don't know his name. Don't know his name from Adam. It's just some kid that's in my class that day. And he got a 2-day suspension. And I don't know what they think that does as a deterrent. I mean, we need schools. I always think of this. We need like an island. It's just an island, and it's a school. And you send those kids there, and you don't ask what happened. You're like, I don't know. I have no idea, but he's there, and are they hitting him? I have no idea. You can't get there because it's surrounded by sharks. I don't know. But this kid, he threatened me on the way out. He said, I'm going to come back for you. And, I'd seen a stabbing at East York Collegiate when I substituted there. So you just say, this is unbelievably, crazy. And he got a 2-day suspension. And I always joke about, what does that do? Do they think those kids go home and look at their watch, pacing around the house going, oh, I'm missing math now. I gotta stop cursing. I'm gonna be way behind in my math lesson. No. They come back twice as angry. And and I remember the first girls class. I talk about it in the book. And it was, the girl's name was Bina. I'll never forget. And it was just, I thought, it was an all-girls grade 9 phys ed class. My first day substituting at Marc Garneau. And they were spitting at me. It was like, this is unbelievable. And I just thought, wow, this is not what I expected. And I'll tell you, I had it easy as a teacher, because I ended up at De La Salle for 9 years where kids chewing gum was an issue. But some of the teachers out there at some of these schools and what they deal with, I applaud that, because I don't know, you basically just let them curse. It just goes in one ear and another. It's just a word after a while.
What did teaching school teach you about being funny?
Again, funny for me was something that was in my blood. It was my dad was funny, and for me, humor was useful if you could do it, because kids connected. Now, the problem for me was there are kids out there, thankfully, that want to be doctors and lawyers and engineers and politicians and smart and go to university. And I forgot that. I cater to the kids that like the good story, but there's some kid in the back probably, is going to law school one day and really needs to know what the lesson is, but I'm in the middle of a story about partying at Western when I was 19 in a hot tub. And nothing inappropriate. I never said anything inappropriate as a teacher, but I never lied to them about what I was like. Like, did you ever try marijuana, sir? Yes, I have tried marijuana, and I have, but I'm not a big addict. But I never got into personal stories that were inappropriate. But I was honest. Have you ever been drunk, sir? Yes, and I would tell it in my mind to deter them.
But you taught sex ed in a Catholic school.
Yeah, it's
and you're a young, unmarried guy teaching sex ed.
Yeah.
So,
Awkward.
and you had to teach them that they shouldn't have sex before marriage.
Yeah.
And they would say, well, you're not married, so are you a virgin?
Yeah.
And did you answer that question?
You asking me that now? Or?
No, well.
I am married. I am a born-again virgin.
So but the kids knew that they had you.
Now, I remember one day I taught, it's grade 8
right.
when you teach sex ed pretty much, grade 7 or 8. And thankfully at my school, no one had the courage to say, are you a virgin, blah, blah, blah. And it would be really tricky. It's again, it's like this crazy oxymoron. You're not, like Catholic, celibate, but no, I don't think there's a teacher that would be that age that would be willing in a Catholic school to risk their job and say, my opinion of that was a discussion that wasn't open to kids. My sex life, your sex life. Some of them had a better sex life than I did. Unfortunately, that's the truth.
Is it true that they asked you what oral sex was?
Yeah, what's oral sex?
What did you say?
It's stuff when you talk about sex. Wait a minute. That was a grade 6. And they really didn't know. So what is oral sex?
Yeah.
You talk about sex, that's all.
Like we're doing right now.
It's tricky. I remember I wrote a list on the board, and girls in grade 8 are just starting to like boys, and I wrote a list of how a relationship should progress, and the first thing was you say hi. And kids are like, oh, sir, that's stupid. No, you say hi, and then you don't talk for a week. And then I got to like point 5. Then you can hold hands, and then you kiss on the cheek, and then you can kiss on the lips, closed mouth. And when you got to after that, you break up, and you find a new boy, and you start again. And this is, and that's probably the same thing I'll tell my young daughters, because. It is crazy that kids unfortunately are at different ages are doing different things. Yeah. I wasn't that kid, so I couldn't relate to that. But yeah, it was tough to teach sex ed at a Catholic school.
You talked about the smart kids just a few minutes ago, and I just wonder, on the smart kids in the class, and then there are kids in the class who aren't so bright. Did you tend to favor one over the other?
Smart kids were a pain in the ass because I wasn't smart teaching it. So, they're asked questions and I have no idea. And you can't say, I have no idea what the answer is. So, what a trick teachers do is we throw the question back on the group. You say, that's a good question, but I'm not here to spoon feed you, so I'd like you, I'd like you to go home tonight, look it up, then you go home, you look it up, you come back. But now there's phones, right? Like my brother-in-law's a teacher, and he says that, he'll just be at the back. He'll be at the back on a computer, and a kid will put up their hand and say, sir, what was the blah, blah, blah of the Confederation? And he just on the computer, and he's like, and he punches it in, right? The question on Google, and he's like, what was that? And he's just delaying. Can you tell us again what year? And then he just waits, and then he's got it. 17, whatever. Yeah, that's how teachers can teach now with, you can Google it while you're there. But that's how I taught for a while. I would give myself a stall tactic. Or you go to a smart kid, that's where they're useful. That's what I had to do. I had to mark the smart kids test first because that would become my answer key. Because they had better answers than I did.
Did you learn this yourself or did somebody teach you?
No, this is all, half these teachers do this. They just can't admit it because they're still teaching.